Hi, investors. It's Nick.
And hi from Martin.
And today we are doing the first of a new series of area assessments. So we're going to basically follow the same structure that we use for our property assessments, where we score each element, as it were, and then we come up with an aggregate score. And from there, it gives you a sense of how we rate an area for its merits and demerits, as it were. So with that in mind, the first thing we're going to do is have a look at a typical Stalybridge property. And with that in mind, Martin, could you share your screen and show us what you got?
I will share my screen. So basically, first about the Stalybridge. It's yeah. So here it is. It's not really large area. The postal is SK15. So yeah. So generally, it's have a train stop, which is great, but not in the all area in Stalybridge. For example, if you how east you are, you will not have. And also when about property similar, it's here it is, it's terrace house, basically this end of terrace, and usually most of the properties in Stalybridge, they are terrace houses, and usually they are built early 90s or like
1900s,
yeah, depends, but most of them they are. You have a good properties there, but the issue with Stalybridge about the properties, you don't have high rent. So basically, because it's a little bit outside from Manchester and the rent is not high and the prices are high, so basically the yield will not really works. For example, the rent will be 850 or 825, so 850 by 12, and the asking price 175, 5.8, and until you need to do renovation. So let's say like for this property like 15,000, and plus you need to beat a little bit, so it will be up to 200. So 850 by 200, it will be 5.1. So basically they don't have high yield. That's the issue with Stalybridge. The area is really good and so on. So yeah.
I think with Stalybridge, it's one of those places where it's nice to live, but just from a public transport point of view, it's just a bit awkward.
Yeah, but anyway, you have everything you have here is central, and you have a lot of stores. You have good schools. You have plenty of green space and parks. So you have a lot of shops, and so you have good access. But depends where you go. For example, generally from Stalybridge to Manchester by transport is only 30 minutes. But if you live close to the train stop, but if you live, let's say, in Buckton Valley, you will need to take a bus like 20 minutes, and after take a train. I'm just saying, depends where from Stalybridge.
Yeah, one of the other issues with Stalybridge is, can I just share my screen? So it's just the geography. And here we go here. And if we just look at the terrain, it's quite hilly throughout the whole area. So the dark areas represent the hilly patches and so on. And what we find is that people don't like living in hilly areas. They don't like walking up and down hilly streets to get wherever they need to go. And that usually has an effect on just the local market. Beyond that, I'm not really sure why it doesn't yield especially well. I suppose you could say it's because it's a real family area, so an awful lot of the houses are quite good. And we can see here, just dropping into this random area, it's just a nice family area, but an awful lot of hills, which is good and it's bad. It just depends what you're into. But I overall, I think it's not so good. Now, so that's a typical property. And what I want to do is just talk through the demographics now. And so the first thing about this area, I'll go full screen so you can see it better. And I'm going to zoom out. And in fact, I'll zoom in because I think we need to do that. There we go. And we can see here, overall, this is the Stalybridge patch. Obviously, there's a lot of countryside and stuff. But broadly, it's it's a fairly good demographic throughout. 86 is a high number. So this is a social AB 26, which is really quite high. This would be, let's say, if you take the overall population of the area, it's mixed. There is quite a lot of local authority housing, but then the thing with the housing is it's not that widespread. It's integrated, and the housing stock is reasonably well done. So in theory, there should be deals here, but in practice, it's quite difficult to find them. The other thing to just bear in mind is crime. So we've got some very accurate crime data, which I'm glad about because we need it. And yes, there are some crime spots around the place, but I think I'm not sure what's going on here, but this is surprisingly high crime, actually. 56 crimes in a year, whereas this one's 21. Still a little bit on the high side, but there are lots of really quiet patches here. For example, there's barely nothing. I mean, it's really, really, really quiet here. And as you go further north, also really quiet. But you know, the problem is the further north you go, the more inaccessible it becomes to Manchester. And then you end up in the nether reaches here, which are very good demographically, very low crime. So the higher the number, the better. Also, people, very high percentage speaking English as a primary language, which is important. It's also an older kind of area. So generally that the richer the area, the older the population. And I think if we were to kind of move down here, we're getting towards Ashton under Lyne, of course. Uh, again, it's just this whole story about good social mix, but just property is quite expensive, rents are not great. And overall, from a demographic point of view, it works quite well. Just annoying that the yields don't work. Now, another big question is what about the local market? How quickly does it move? And the answer is very. So 32% turnover, and this is pretty recent data, is high. So for SK15, if I zoom out further and we look at that, SK15, it's busy as a market goes. And there's for rental demand, I don't know exactly. It's difficult to say because we don't have that data. But overall, I would say that anywhere with brisk purchase demand, you're going to have high rental demand because they're both tied into the same fundamentals, which is people want to live there. Anyway, moving on to capital growth. It is pretty good around here. I'll make it bigger so you can see it. It's healthy, but it's not absolutely red hot. It's strong, but not red hot, I would say. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I want to add the property who have, and I will give you an example. The property who have they are close to the train stop. They have better yield. How far away you go, the yield is much lower, and it go up to 3.84%. So basically, it's more like all this area. It's not the best for investing. It's more like a owner occupiers area, I will say.
Mm.
And that's why the capital growth is not super hot, because investors don't pulling in a lot in it. But the capital growth still doing good.
Yeah, so really, I think, one should be thinking about Ashton under Lyne a little bit more, perhaps. But we're going to do plenty of these assessments, and then, we'll build up a set of rankings. And I've already got some rankings here, but we're going to kind of start again, as it were, and do them this way. Now, getting back to it, so the capital gain is good, but my issue with Stalybridge is that whilst it's accessible to central Manchester, as I say, for buy-to-let, not so good, for lifestyle, good, crime, as ever, quite patchy, house prices reasonably high, although there are patches which work. So this area here, but it's very mixed and there's quite a lot of crime in these areas. but with crime, it's very localized. And the further north you go, the worse the capital gain, because the less desirable it is, because these houses are very inaccessible, or this area is inaccessible to central Manchester.
Yeah,
So that's the kind of capital gain story. Overall, I would say it's one of the highest growing areas in the country. It did okay in the last crash. It wasn't terrible, kind of average-ish. And as we see with the median house prices, there is some value here. So a semi-detached house, 156, and a terraced 137. It's a bit higher because this data is just about 6 months old, because that's the latest data we can get from Land Registry. And the overall growth, it's solid-ish. It's slightly under inflation at the moment, but overall it's okay. Now, should we get into flood risk,
yeah,
mining
uh,
risk, and all of that
yeah,
lovely stuff?
yeah. So before we start with that, I just want to give you an example. For example, property who is really, so here is a prop. I will give you two properties on the map. So you will, so map. Okay, here it is. So, here is one property, really central, and it's terrace house, 170. The one what I show is here. This one, end of terrace, 170, and the rent will be around 850. And you have a property, 210, a little bit outside, not really good connection to transport. So the price is 210, but the rent will be again maybe the same or even lower than 850. Maybe it will be 795. So basically, it's not the rental market is the issue with the Stalybridge. The rental market is not high. It's more about if you're buying Stalybridge, you need to really buy really close to the train stop if you want to achieve high rent. So that's the issue with Stalybridge about investing. It's nice area, but it's really like bad for yield if you want to buy further away from where you don't have good transport. And also the issue is that the tickets for train are more expensive than the buses, for example. So that's why it's not really the best area to invest. And also for the water risk and surface water, basically it doesn't have a lot risk. It can be your property can be medium risk. It will not be like a high risk. So it's
Well, there
really
might be
low.
reservoir flood risk because of the reservoir in certain areas, but
Yeah, but it doesn't have.
yeah,
So so
but it's
basically
very
it's
hilly up there, so
yeah,
the
yeah,
water is going to drain
so
away.
yeah, so there is no also the rivers and the sea, there is no like some risk. So basically about the flooding, it's no risky area. No, about the coal mining, so basically all the coal mining in Stalybridge, they're outside from it's far away from the houses. So you have just like three like location where it's
Okay.
risky. All the rest are all this area in Stalybridge is it's no risk. So basically it's safe area for coal mining. So basically it's no risky area about. But as we said, the issue is the transport. So and that's why the yield is not great, and the price is going up as well in there.
Okay. Should we score this
Yeah,
place? And here we go. All right. Now, these are previous scores that I did some time ago. Now, the way the scoring works is that I've got a rank weighting. So these are things that have relative importance. So, for example, how long it takes to sell isn't that important, really. But if it takes a very long time to sell a property, then it's a very slow market. That's a worry. But generally, it's not. Anyway, so that's the rankings. And the so the first thing is location. Now, when we think about location, it's not so much is the location good for walking in hills and beauty? Yes, it is. Is it good for Manchester? That's really the question. What's your opinion?
some areas are really good, some areas really bad. Depends how further away you go in the end of Stalybridge is not the best transport, so they are not the good ones. So that's why, yeah, I agree with the previous score. What you give is 3.
Okay. And I think with Stalybridge, the other problem on location, by the way, is obviously proximity, but just the, there are very few areas that actually work for buy to let in Stalybridge. So therefore, you have a very small pool of properties to pick from because small area, small number of properties, just infrequent purchases. Demographic, it's actually quite good on the whole.
Yeah.
So on the idea that you avoid the bad bits, as it were, as you would with any area. Overall, Stalybridge, good demographic, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah, I will. There are some patches where you have like social houses, but there are not a lot. So, but I like it. I mean, the demographics are really good. So you will have a good tenant, but the issue with Celebrity, you don't have a lot of demand for rent, and that's why the prices don't go up for the rent as well. So
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that when we get to yield. And the crime, well, crime is okay. Again, it's that old story. You just got to avoid the bad areas. Where crime would be bad, so a low score is a bad thing, high score is a good thing, by the way. That's roughly how we're doing it. And I would say overall, it's okay. It's pretty average. It's not spectacularly bad. If we were to do a case study of Moston, then there are large areas of Moston which are terrible. But, again, it's that old story, you buy in the right spot.
yeah,
Growth, uh, growth is an okay story. I'm not, I think it's okay. I think it's fairly strong, but I think the issue with Stalybridge is that it's okay actually. I think as compared to a lot of areas in Manchester, it's not quite as strong. So here it is here. What we're looking for is the numbers and the colors. It's strong, but prices are a bit high. And but I say that they're not super high. I think it's got growth potential. But the issue is that the areas with headroom for growth are not great areas. The areas that are really prime, like this patch down here, uh, they're already kind of oversold in terms of price. So the median house price for a semi is £234,000. It's too much. Doesn't make sense for buy to let. So from a growth point of view, I'm going to give it a 3.5. I think it's quite strong, but it's not great. Sell time.
oh, it will sell. I know
Yeah.
what we have like properties with DL, the ones who are close to a train stop, because they have good yield. But few of them, yeah, but it sell high and it sell fast. So yeah, it will
Mm.
sell.
A rent time, it'll rent quickly,
Yeah,
but
yeah, right
it's the
now, but
yield,
it,
right?
yeah, so it will not have good yield.
Mm.
And the yield I will say it is generally whole Stalybridge is 3. Some areas it's really I will give 2.5, but some area I will give 4. So maybe
Well,
3.2 the yield.
yeah, okay. Well, we have to average, we have to kind of generalize here, as it were. So that's the idea. All right, so that gets a 3.6 out of 5. So to give you context on property scores, for example, our average is about 4. So we would say on the whole, if an area was a 4 across the board, then it's a contender. Anything above 4, and then it's a really interesting contender. So I think that's how we would define that. And therefore, I think that score is quite good in a way. I mean, it reflects my feeling about Stalybridge. What about yours?
Yeah, as I said, this is generally for whole Stalybridge. You can find a property who will be 4.5
Mm,
in the score, but you will find the property will have 2.2 score because it will be owner occupier's place because the yield will be really low. So
yeah.
in Stalybridge, if you find good yield property and if the property is good condition, not compromised location, then it's really good to invest. But the
Mm,
question is, can you find that kind of property?
exactly.
Uh,
And it's rare. There's
yeah,
just not very much stock there.
yeah, yeah.
And the other thing is that there are lots of other areas in Manchester which we'll be analysing, like Radcliffe, Lee, and these kind of places where actually there's just an awful lot more stock. It's all kind of the same. And the yields are good because people want to live there because it's an easy place for them to go to work, because people who rent generally work. And that's why Stalybridge kind of doesn't quite work out, because it's just not a great go to work destination, or go from home to work destination, as it were. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, great. Okay, any final comments from you before we wrap up?
Yeah, Stalybridge generally works if you find the right deal. Not bad demographics, not a lot of crime generally, so the capital growth good, so no risks. So if you find the right deal property, I will buy it.
Yeah, but if you find the property, that's the tricky bit.
Yeah.
All right then. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.